Hey guys, Janos here. In this video I wanted to show you a few things to be aware of when using the ADR features in DaVinci Resolve. Let's go. So before we dive deeper into the topic, I just want to give you a quick disclaimer up front. And that is, I'm working on a Mac system, and although I think it is pretty similar to the way Windows works, I'm not entirely sure about this, so keep that in mind. And the other thing is, all the issues I'm talking about occurred while working pretty intense with the ADR features, so you might never actually encounter one of the issues I'm talking here about. But yeah, that's all for now. Let's jump in DaVinci and let's see what we're dealing with. All right, we are in DaVinci. I just created a test project. I loaded a file that I'm actually working on, and we are in the Fairlight tab. And you can see I already patched my in and outputs. I'm going to show you this in a minute. But first, let's set a baseline here, okay? The first thing is, let's have a look at the audio MIDI setup. And we kind of want to try to remember, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 devices here. And we just leave it at this. The Universal Thunderbolt is set as my in and output device. And we also take a look at DaVinci's preferences. And under video and audio I/O, I tested this quite a bit, and it actually doesn't matter what interface or setting you use. You can use the system settings as well as an interface. It will change, trust me. But in my case, I want to use the UAD Thunderbolt for both, because no matter what I set in the audio MIDI setup, I always want those in and outputs in my NLE. So 9 and 10 is good. We're going to save this. Okay, in the session, this is a very simple session for testing purposes only. I set up a few tracks, one of which is my talkback, and the other one is my recording track in. And I can show you the input. So we need to remember the channel inputs, okay? I set my talkback in to the Universal Audio Thunderbolt 4 in. So we remember talkback 4. And my recording track is patched to the input 19 of my UAD. I also created an additional bus for the Q out, and we can have a look at this as well. Choosing bus out and audio outputs. And you can see the Q12 is going to 29 and 30 on my interface. So now let's close DaVinci, and we're gonna save this, of course. And now imagine that something changes in your in and outputs, okay? And I had this actually just recently, that I was recording via session link over the internet, and the picture I sent to the client was kind of laggy. So I tried to use my capture card, and all I did was I'm gonna show you this real quick. I connect my capture card to my Mac. The screen is going to black for a moment. And now you can see in the I/O settings, the capture card comes with a mono input. And this is, of course, also shown in the audio MIDI setup. So not a big deal, I thought, and let's open up DaVinci and see if it's a big deal. Before I actually open a session, I'm gonna check real quick the preferences. And what is this? Input device, Pro Tools aggregate I/O. I didn't set this up. So this is one thing that really gets to my nerves. Without asking and without even a notification, DaVinci decided to use the Pro Tools aggregated I/O instead of my Thunderbolt. Not cool. Okay, we set this back, go to save, and now I'm going to load the test session. And I think some of you already see the problem here. We remembered that the talkback in is patched to 4 and the recording in was patched to 19. So now this is all of a sudden patched to 3 and the recording track is patched to 18. Let's see what the output channels are patched to. The bus out, we can see this right here. The bus out Q1 is 2728. And if you remember, it was set to 29 and 30. So this is something you really need to know before working with DaVinci. The thing is, if you have a setup where in and outputs never change, you will be fine, okay? But if you, like me, I'm working, sometimes I have my room correction SonarWork reference, for example, running. This adds 2 outputs, 2 in and outputs. Sometimes I have an application called APOCam when my iPhone is connected wireless to the Mac. And so many variables, okay, like the capture card, for example. So my in and outputs pretty much change constantly. And the problem here is, I can show you actually what the problem is. Let's go to the patch in and output. And if you click right here, you can name your IOs. And if I'm gonna open this up, you can see the problem right here, okay? DaVinci doesn't look at your audio interface specifically or isolated like Pro Tools would, for example. DaVinci looks all the time at all available in and outputs. And the first one is the capture card, the USB device, which was formerly not connected. And it numbers those in and outputs just in order. It goes from in all the way to the outputs. So there is not even a difference between the numbering of the inputs and the numbering of the outputs, which would solve at least a little bit. But everything, so as soon as something in this chain changes, it changes everything. And this is really the problem. So originally I patched the Universal Audio Thunderbolt input 4 to my track, and DaVinci doesn't take this as input 4 from your Apollo device or from your audio device. Instead, it takes the internal input and 37. It is now 37. So if something changes here, your patching is basically chaos. And if I had SonarWorks running in addition, or if I had APOCam running, then it would be a total mess. That is something you really need to be aware of before. So if you encounter this problem and you all of a sudden your patching isn't correct, either you have to repatch or make sure that your audio MIDI setup is the same way as you did when you set up the session. Now, I also want to show you another issue, and this is probably intended, I'm not sure, but if you go to the Fairlight preset library, this is actually really useful. you can build presets for pretty much everything. And the one I was very interested in is the Fairlight configuration presets, because I had quite a, I'd say, complex routing here going on, and since everything here is kind of related to the audio patching, I assumed that the Fairlight configuration preset is just all of the patching, the in and outs and your tracks and all that stuff. And yeah, I saved a new preset, and when something changed or when I thought I need a new session, I just applied this. And here's the thing I want to show you. If you're using ADR, okay, and let's say you build a new cue right here. Let's do this actually. We don't have a character, and we'll now, if you're not on the ADR page and you load a preset, let me show this real quick. So for example, this is the preset I'm using for my ADR, and I'm gonna apply this. And now everything comes up as I set it up for my ADR sessions, unless of course the patching isn't right. But something else, look at my ADR cues. Oops. Yep, they're gone. And the reason is Fairlight actually saves your ADR cues within the configuration preset, okay? So that caught me kind of off guard, because I didn't even have the ADR panel open. So I didn't notice this. Much later, I was wondering why my ADRs are gone, my cues are gone. Now I know. So it is probably best to keep that in mind. The way I do it now is I just save per episode. When I'm working on this episode, I apply this, then my ADRs are all here. So yeah, those are the basic things. Just to recap real quick, if you set your interface in the preferences and something changes, DaVinci will also change this. So always check your preferences first. Then the second one is, as soon as something changes in the MIDI, audio MIDI setup, your patching will also be different. Keep that in mind. And the third thing is, if you save an entire configuration and you are using ADR cues, then keep in mind that the configuration saves the cues as well. So whenever you save your configuration is the timestamp of your cues, okay? So I would actually recommend to not use the configuration if you're using cues. So that is what I think. Now, that's actually it for the video. I really hope that I could spare you some trouble. Maybe you never encounter any of this problem, and that's a good thing. Otherwise, I see you in the next video.